And we're back on the Dr. Rima Truth Reports. This is Ralph Fusatola, JD, Dr. Rima's co-host. Dr. Rima is in India right now, having just finished making a presentation to an Indian medical convention regarding, the title was Regulations and Results. And it's about what happens in a politicized, crony, corporatist illness care system and the outcomes that you get, and the type of outcomes you might get if you had a healthcare system that was aimed at keeping people healthy instead of managing illness. And in her paper, she spent a lot of time talking about vaccinations as an example. And what she's been telling people in India, the doctors she's been talking to, is that there are two great sovereign nutritional remedies that could help a lot in India and anywhere in the world. And one of those, of course, is nanosilver, 10 parts per million, which is a nutrient that supports immune system function. And the other is CBD, cannabidiol, the part of hemp that is wonderful for your health, but doesn't get you high. So we're back on the Dr. Rima Truth Reports. She is off doing things in India right now. And we have as our guest, today's guest, to talk to us about not just CBD hemp, but other types as well, Alison Myrden, who is calling in from Canada. Alison, are you with us?
I am, Ralph. Nice to meet you and wonderful to be a part of this fabulous show. Thank you so much, sir.
All right. Can you tell us a little bit about who you are, where you came from? That's how Dr. Rima likes to start her interviews. And if I'm going to be her substitute today, I'll try to follow her carefully honed psychologist's approach. Tell us about your past.
You bet. We'll try to make this as painless as possible, Ralph, but here I go. My name, for those interested, is Alison Myrden, and I am not only one of Canada's very first medically licensed medical cannabis patients from 1994, but I also am a retired corrections officer, a retired law enforcement officer, and speak for an organization known as LEAP, Law Enforcement Against Prohibition, based in the United States. Even though I'm Canadian, I do a lot of global work, and I've been around this issue for over 2 decades, Ralph, and educating people as I go. So that's me in a nutshell.
All right. Very good. So since 94, you've been a medical marijuana user. I assume there was some medical development that occurred that led you to need to retire from law enforcement and to become one of the first legal medical marijuana users. Can you share that with us? Are you willing to, anything that's traumatic to discuss, but we'd love to know how you got to where you are.
Certainly not, Ralph. I'd love to share that with your listeners. Well, again, I've been battling chronic progressive MS, diagnosed at the age of 28, back to the age of about 10 years old. So I knew most of my life that I had been battling a pretty nasty illness. And then in my when I reached my probably about my 23rd year, I started having a violent flick of pain in my face sporadically that slowly over the next few years, turned into something diagnosed as the worst pain known to medicine, also called the suicide disease, known as trigeminal neuralgia in medical terms, and tic-douloureux in society's terms. So again, I have what is known as bilateral tic-douloureux associated with chronic progressive multiple sclerosis. So I've been using things like medical cannabis in my medical regime, from pretty much the beginning. Ralph, for your listeners, was diagnosed again with multiple sclerosis in 1992, chronic progressive, back again to the age of 10 years old. But I've been using a lot of pharmaceutical medications, Ralph, in so much so the doctors at one point had been giving me over 50 pills a day.
Oh my.
And 2,000 milligrams of morphine every day to fight the excruciating pain that I lived with from tic-douloureux.
Did this lead you to explore the possibilities of of medical hemp, and what were the results?
You know, it was funny, Ralph. It was actually a pain specialist here in Canada that introduced me to medical cannabis or medical hemp and ended up actually telling me. I actually, in a roundabout way, contacted Dr. Lester Grinspoon from Harvard Medical
Right.
School in the U.S. And when I had Dr. Grinspoon on the phone, I was asking him for questions. I was asking him where basically, will cannabis, as you just asked me, will it help me and will it work? Well, Dr. Grinspoon told me 20 years ago not to give up, that cannabis was definitely an answer for what I suffered from. And that, again, having suffered from the worst pain known to medicine, there was nothing else that was stopping me from trying it. And he told me I might as well continue to go ahead. Again, my regime, Ralph, was 32 pills a day, 2,000 milligrams of morphine. Then doctors gave me cocaine and then heroin. And it wasn't until actually...
And this was all to stop you from using an illegal herb.
No, actually, that's before I started using cannabis. And then I found cannabis and got off of all of that.
Now that is an amazing story. So you were literally, the progress went from the usual painkillers to morphine to cocaine and heroin.
Yes.
And none of that was controlling this extraordinary pain. And then you tried regular ordinary smoking bud. I assume in those days it wouldn't have been any medicinal extract.
You bet, and it still isn't for me there, Ralph. Most of the patients that I deal with here in Canada are like me and either grow their own or are on the street looking for help.
Yeah, I understand.
You know, there aren't too many that go to licensed producers and can afford that.
That's something we want to hear about. So there's a difference in price if you go to the government-approved dispensary or if you buy it on the street.
There is, most definitely. It's absolutely egregious of our government to do this to the patients here in Canada who choose this as medicine.
What type of markup does the monopoly add?
Oh, it can be as much as 100% in some cases.
Let's see.
So it goes from zero to, some patients pay nothing, and then next, the licensed producers are charging $15 to $20 a gram.
Got it.
So again, pennies to $15 to $20 a gram is completely egregious, and not acceptable by any patient here in Canada, around the world, Ralph.
Dr. Greenspan, who we've had contact with, gave you some good advice back in '94, and he gave it to you at the very beginning of our understanding of what cannabis does. It was only back in the mid-'90s that the endocannabidiol receptor system was even begun to be understood, or at least discovered. And it's only been in recent years that the entire concept that our bodies have a neurotransmitter system built around cannabidiol. And that, of course, to us is a very important point to raise, because Dr. Rima makes a distinction between the CBDs that are found in hemp and the THC. And there's a major debate going on among the holistic doctors, including Dr. Rima. Is it necessary to have some THC to get the strongest result for people? Or is the CBD by itself sufficient to modulate pain, to stimulate immunity, and to lead to homeostasis and neurological balance? And that's as a person who has been in the middle of that, using it medicinally for decades, do you feel that where do you stand on that debate, and how do you think we can resolve and understand how best to make use of this wonderful herb?
I think you pose, as Dr. Rima does, some excellent questions, Ralph, in so much so that excuse me, I'm the patient representative for the International Association for Cannabinoid Medicines, and I'm the Canadian patient representative. This organization is based in Bonn, Germany. What we do, Ralph, is work I'm on the board, and what I do is I sit as a patient, and I give them my particular, as you had just said, opinion on whether or not cannabis is good medicine. And what they do is they continue to study it as medicine with every possible illness and disease and disability, etc., that they can find. So again, I would love for people to check out the IACM, the International Association for Cannabinoid Medicines, and they, like Dr. Rima, are doing amazing work with not just CBD, but CBD, CBN, another cannabinoid called Win55, which is hugely used in people like me with multiple sclerosis, THC, THCA. There's a number of different cannabinoids that I would love for our listeners to get accustomed to hearing.
We have a wonderful little chart that we picked up somewhere, a pie chart that shows all of those and some of their health benefits, and we posted that on a couple of places on our website. So yes, we're very much excited by learning more. And of course, there's an important distinction here, and that is that the actual cannabidiols, the CBDs, are not just native to the hemp plant, but they're native to our bodies as well. We have those receptor sites because our bodies make and use endocannabidiol as part of the neurotransmitter system. And so, supplementing with cannabidiol and its relatives is very similar to what we do in many other natural approaches, where we take something that the body makes naturally, such as DHEA, and we supplement it in order to help people as they age maintain more youthful levels. That's different, of course, than what's called a vitamin, which is something that the body doesn't make on its own, like the essential amino acids, which you have to take in from the outside world. This is more of a substance that becomes depleted as one ages or becomes less healthy. And by supplementing, we increase the body's ability to function, to reach homeostasis, to reach balance. And when it's in balance, then you experienced what it does. It relieves you of pain. My questions about, and to delve into deeper into how this works, how it works for you personally, is part of what we'd like to do in this interview. You have what I agree is well recognized by the medical community as one of the most painful conditions, and literally so painful that they ratchet you up from morphine to cocaine to heroin in an attempt to give you some relief. And what you get relief from, of course, is hemp. So the question becomes, how did that process happen? How did you go from the drugs to the herb, and how did it feel as you came off those drugs? What was that process like? The transition from the chemical to the biological, if you will.
Well, it certainly was a ride, I'll tell you that much, Ralph. And one thing I didn't tell your listeners, which I would love for them to check out as well on my website at AlisonMyrden.com, is the fact that I've also been taking something which you were just completely talking about for the last few minutes, known as a supplement DHEA. I take DHEA, I take fatty acids, I take all kinds of supplements and vitamins and minerals, antioxidants, and have for almost 3 decades as well, Ralph. And these sorts of things are imperative, as you said, to not only know our body about and know what our body needs, but to actually feed our body with. So what I did actually when I was coming down from a lot of those terrible and vile medications that they had me on, including medical heroin and medical cocaine, although I don't know if there's much difference between the street drugs and those illicit medications. Ultimately, what I was doing was I was actually supplementing with medical cannabis because a doctor had actually supplemented my regime with medical cannabis at that time. They had suggested that I consume medical cannabis, and I found as I was consuming medical cannabis, taking 32 pills a day, 2,000 milligrams of morphine, heroin, and cocaine, I didn't need all of that. I found that I could get much, much more with just smoking a half of a medical marijuana cigarette than I ever could with taking, milligrams or grams of heroin via the routes they were giving me, the administration that they were offering. So, and I remember going to hospitals, Ralph, three times a week, a local hospital, getting cocaine literally shoved up my nose while I was lying on a table. And I remember thinking and praying that that day would come soon, that it would end, and that I would find something other than that to do.
Oh my gosh, for sure.
So, yes, so I certainly went through. I'm very well known in Canadian media for my use of medical cannabis in place of a lot of these pharmaceuticals and things that they put people like myself who battle multiple sclerosis on without even, blinking an eye.
You are actually living what Dr. Rima has told us is the results of what would be the results of wide use of hemp, which she calls the holy grail of natural health. And I salute you on your, on being a pioneer. Certainly, that's, sometimes a tough place to be. I'm happy that you can report that you have relief. So if you don't smoke cannabis for any period of time, does the pain recur? How long have you gone without the pain? Is it a change? Is it a rebalancing? Because it covered the pain? Does the pain happen while you're smoking? Those are all the sort of questions that I'm sure we have from people who might be in your circumstances that might be thinking of trying to get off those dangerous drugs and onto something natural.
Yes. Well, most definitely. What I found was not only could I substitute a lot of those heavier medications, including cocaine and heroin, for medical cannabis.
Yes.
But I actually found that the medical cannabis did much more for me than the actual cannabis, or the actual heroin and cocaine ever could. So not just that, but the 32 pills a day and 2,000 milligrams of morphine that I also took for 18 years was hugely detrimental to my health.
Of course.
That kept me in a wheelchair and kept me basically in bed, sick to my stomach every day of my life, constantly vomiting, trying to keep pills down. It was a horrible life, Ralph. I would never wish it on a soul. And again, if people learn that cannabis can be used to get people away from heavy narcotics like cocaine and heroin, and can be used to help people like myself, people like me, off of heavy medications like morphine, OxyContins, Percocet, Percodan, etc. I think they need to really do their homework and look into that, because again, cannabis tended to help me eliminate so many heavy pills and heavy drugs that were in my system for, as I said, almost 2 decades, Ralph. And it wasn't until I got those out of my system. And although now I still use quite a bit of Dilaudid, I take Dilaudid, and I smoke up to 30 cannabis cigarettes a day, because one of the questions you did ask me was my pain kept under control with it? Yes, I can keep my pain at bay when I eat cannabis and cookies and pizza and lasagna and ice cream and all these wonderful things for a few hours. But when I just smoke it, Ralph, I tend to have that pain come back pretty quickly. So within a half an hour, I'm back up to it.
When you're talking about 30 hemp cigarettes a day, how much weight of marijuana are you smoking on a daily basis?
Well, it's not so much what I'm smoking, Ralph, although I'm smoking, again, approximately 2-gram cannabis cigarettes a day.
All right, so it's all right. Got it.
But again, I'm chasing this violent pain that I have in my face and head 24 hours a day that I don't and haven't gotten relief from for many years now, Ralph. It's gotten worse the older I've got. So if you told me that.
Yeah, got it. I understand that. Are you still wheelchair bound, or have you had any recovery in that direction as well?
Actually, I got up on my feet over a decade ago.
Oh, really? Oh, wonderful.
Yes, and touch wood, now walk probably 75% of the time with my cane, and then the rest of the time I'm in a wheelchair, electric wheelchair, doing media here in Canada and speaking, etc.
Sure, I understand. That's good that you're able to get up, and it's good that you're able to sit down when you need to. and that the pain is not such that you can't have a quality of life. So the pain is there, but the hemp helps make it bearable. Is that part of it?
Exactly, Ralph. And I have a little joke for your listeners that I don't really have MS. I am a mess. MESS. It's a lot easier to explain.
Very nice, very nice. That's very good. So let's see. Tell us more about the status of medical marijuana in Canada. Most of our listeners, well, they're actually from around the world, so there's different laws everywhere. But we learn by understanding what different people are experiencing. So, what does it take to become a legal medical marijuana patient in Canada? And what did it take you as one of the first?
Well, things have changed quite a
Oh
bit,
yeah.
Ralph, since I came on board with this program. I actually started, my personal history was that I wrote a letter to the federal health minister here in Canada, Alan Rock, who was the Liberal health minister at the time.
Right.
And actually not just asked him, but begged him with not only myself, my mother, who my father had just passed away just before then, but my doctor as well. And the three of us had written to this again, federal health minister, begging for someone like myself to be able to be allowed to be put into a medical cannabis study or some effect, something using medical cannabis here in Canada. And that was in the mid to late 1990s. Then again, we ended up coming up with something, a program in Canada for patients like myself, because there were probably fewer than 100 of us at that time in the 90s who had applied to the government to use cannabis as medicine. And they had actually started a program here in Canada called the Section 56 exemption, which exempted us from Section 56 of the Controlled Drugs and Substances Act here in Canada, allowing us to consume and possess cannabis as medicine. Then in 2002, 2003, I think it was closer to 2003, I started a lawsuit here in Canada with one of my lawyers, my main lawyer, Professor Alan Young, called the Hitzig et al. Case. And Hitzig basically ended up changing the face of the medical cannabis program in Canada, so much so that Canada then soon after, within a few years, implemented a program called the Medical Marijuana Access Regulations. And patients like myself, who were Section 56 exemptees, were forced to go into that program, the MMAR, of which I was one of the first 20 patients in Canada. And then again, from there, we now have today what is called the Marijuana for Medical Purpose Regulations here in Canada, or the MMPR, that was started in the summer of 2013, around June 7th. So that's where we are today here in Canada with the medical regime of marijuana.
All right. Now, in some American states, there's been a move towards allowing recreational use of marijuana. Is anything happening north of the border in that area as well?
Sadly enough, our Prime Minister Stephen Harper, does not agree with this issue at all. And when he first came into power almost a decade ago, he canceled all of the studies involving cannabis as medicine involved in this country. So we were very upset that this particular government does not have an open mind and does not, sadly enough, think outside of the box like a lot of us do.
And in Canada, the central government has control over this sort of thing, and it's not a matter that the provinces can legislate on?
Sadly enough, that would be a provincial issue if that were province related, Ralph. But here in Canada, our federal government is who has power over the entire country.
Right.
So somewhat like in the U.S. with Obama now being the federal government, and then the states individually having their own, fights as well and their own laws as well.
Got it. Okay. Very interesting. So let's go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, it's actually coming up here in Canada, so much so that people like myself and Mark Emery, I'm actually a medical, consumer here in Canada, Canada, but a well-known personality here in Canada on the other end of our country. I'm in Ontario, Canada, somewhat in the middle of our country. And on the West Coast, actually, is a well-known activist named Mark Emery, who actually fights for the legalization of cannabis as well, but for recreational and social utility rather than medical. So we have a similar fight. Mark and I know each other well, sorry. And we have a similar battle going on. But both of us, I know, would love to see this plant legalized and regulated here in Canada, bottom line. So
good. Do you think that the developments in the United States, in the various states that have been legalizing recreational use, will impact the political process in Canada, and that it'll make it more likely that that there'll be a movement in that direction on a nationwide basis?
We're hoping that's going to be the outcome. You know, again, Mark Emery was in jail in the U.S. for 5 years for selling seeds to people in the United States from his home here in Canada. He never set foot in the United States, right? So those sorts of things, I think, have a huge impact on our Canadian, you know, not just our economy, but our you know, governmental views, et cetera, and how this is viewed just in general and around the world. So, but I know that the Canadian government does not want to look soft on drugs. And that's why people like myself, I'm also a retired corrections officer, Ralph, and I speak for a law enforcement agency from the United States based there, actually known as LEAP, Law Enforcement Against Prohibition. And the reason I bring them up is because LEAP has done some amazing work around the world, including in your area of the world. James Garrett, one of our speakers, was just out in that area not too long ago. I believe it was last summer or last year. We had a LEAP speaker out your way. But ultimately, again, you know, I know that these things, again, are global issues, Ralph. Indeed. So it's only a matter of time before it does make some sort of impact.
Right. Well, you know, we as a foundation, Natural Solutions Foundation, is involved with a licensed hemp grower, industrial hemp grower in Chile, and we're working on creating a truly organic, low radiation crop of industrial hemp from which we'll be able to extract lots of CBDs. We're looking at bringing out our own CBD product. Dr. Rima recommends as the product line. You know, we've learned how to do organic farming by running an organic coffee finca or plantation in Panama, and that coffee plantation is doing so well that even though we give away our coffee to our foundation supporters when they give us donations, we have a lot of it left over that's not roasted. And we have recently had an alchemist we know run an extract. So we now have this wonderful raw, fermented, organic green coffee elixir that's been extracted into organic glycerin, which makes it a non-nutritive sweetener. And we're going to add to that CBDs. So we will have Dr. Rima's Green Gold, an elixir that will deliver a good portion, a good dosage of CBDs at the same time that it delivers the antioxidant and other benefits of green coffee. And of course, I call it a raw fermented product because literally in the process of making the coffee, when the coffee is picked and the berry, the bean is taken out of the berry, and it's actually put on inside drying sheds. These are open-sided roofed structures with a concrete floor, and they basically stir it for 7 days, a couple of times a day, and as it dries, it actually ferments. So coffee is actually a fermented food, and it's raw because it's never heated above. Even though it gets warm, of course, because of the drying process, the fermenting process, it's never heated above the critical temperature, so it's always a raw food. And so that's where we want to bring that together with CBDs. We love bringing together things that have benefits that work synergistically. That's one of the reasons Dr. Rima likes the coffee CBD products. You know, and of course you're telling us really about all of the other ingredients in hemp that have such wonderful health benefits. Now, in our country, we have to keep a careful distinction between things that treat disease
Yes.
and nutrients that support normal structure and function, or what we call homeostasis. So we're always very careful never to claim that that CBD treats any disease. What it does is it supports normal function by supplementing the diet. So that to us is the primary step. When you were telling me earlier a little bit about how you use it, you said that you smoke what used to be called joints back in the day, and you also use it in food, and there's a different effect. I would love to hear from you a little bit about the difference in effect, and also what type of foods, and give us a couple of recipes. I mean, I'm sure there are people out there who would love to know, what we do. We have, we have about a half an hour on our program. So we have a chance to delve into the culture of hemp as part of what's happening, because there's always a cultural context. Healing is always in that sort of context. When we were talking on the phone before the show, I mentioned the herbalist charter of King Henry VIII, and that's a part of the culture of both the United States and Canada, and of course England. It's part of our common law. And that story is a good example of how herbs can be used for health. It was back in 1540 something that Parliament in London passed the first medical licensing law, and it said nobody can practice medicine or surgery within 1 mile of the borders of the City of London without first being approved by the College of Surgeons and Physicians under the Bishop of London. And immediately the College of Surgeons and Physicians started suing people who were herbalists and doing the equivalent of making hemp available, probably making hemp available actually, and within a couple of years, Parliament had to pass a special law to protect the herbalists, and the King signed that, and it's known as the Herbalist Charter, and it said it applies to England and all the King's domains. And so the common law of the English-speaking world includes in it a specific charter that says that you have a right not just to use herbs for health, but to offer it to others. And I strongly suspect that that cannabis was one of those herbs that was part of that. Those medications arising in India, for example, the tinctures of cannabis that were developed thousands of years ago as part of Ayurvedic practices, those made their way to England in that era, most certainly, along with the rest of the spice trade, and people understood their use. So it's it wasn't just the Muslim world that found benefit in the flowering tops of the hemp plant. And now today, we have the choice. We can purchase medicinally the high THC flowering tops of the hemp plant after a half a century of careful horticultural development. The THC content has dramatically increased, perhaps, although there's some debate on that. And we also now can get the equivalent in high CBD, almost no THC flowering tops. And we understand that there's a great deal of interest in the natural health community in using the flowering tops with vaporizers. And so you draw the product of the vaporizer into your mouth, and of course you swallow because it's a dietary supplement. And in the United States, the Congress of the United States, in its great wisdom, when it defined what a dietary supplement was, it said that it's ingested. And so the FDA says if it's not ingested, if you inhale it, for example, if you squirt it up your nose, if you dissolve it under your tongue, any of those things, it's no longer a dietary supplement. It's an unapproved drug. So we're always very careful to tell people, if you're melting your dietary supplement under your tongue, make sure you swallow after. If you're drawing it into your mouth, make sure you swallow when you're done with your vaping. So we don't want the government to get the erroneous idea that we're engaging in treating disease using unapproved drugs. What we're doing is providing nutrition. And one of the best ways is through eating. It is through ingesting. So tell us some of your favorite ways to ingest. You mentioned pizza. I guess the hemp substitutes for oregano. Tell me more about it.
Funny enough, actually, it's not quite like that, Ralph.
Tell me.
Listeners can use it all different ways.
Yeah.
The particular woman that actually has baked for me over the last few years has been what's called my designated grower up here in Canada. And she has made me everything from pizza, as I said, but to ice cream. And what she does is she uses cannabis oil to make these particular ingredients with, and actually finds that that's not just better medicine for patients like myself, but that again, she can control the higher CBD or lower THC depending on how she makes that particular medicine to go into my food. So what she does is she makes everything, as I said, from pizza to...
Does she make is it the pizza dough or is it the pizza topping?
She makes the pizza dough. That's an excellent question. She makes it in the dough, and she uses the cannabis oil in the dough. And then, I'm sure our listeners or your listeners, again, if they're interested in experimenting, could use a little bit of the cannabis on top of the pizza if they wanted to. Foreigner, I'm sure that wouldn't hurt. But again, I actually like to go to a particular website myself called the Stoner's Cookbook at thestonerscookbook.com. And that actually has everything under the sun, from sweets to snacks to drinks, dips and spreads, everything you can name that you can think of making, especially with things like CBDs and some of the cannabis that's available in your area.
Right.
That certainly is a completely different effect. As you had said, Ralph, I'll get into that now. The effect is much different, and so much so that when I smoke what's called a joint, or a medical marijuana cigarette, I like to call it,
right.
I actually end up having the effect almost immediately from pain relief from this violent pain I have in my face and head 24 hours a day. So it's gone within seconds sometimes, depending on the strain that I'm consuming.
Right.
But when I eat, ultimately, it takes 45 minutes to an hour to actually get some relief to start, unless I'm smoking before I eat.
Got it.
But ultimately, it takes about 45 minutes to an hour to kick in. And then what it does, because it goes through your stomach and it goes through your digestive system, it ends up taking a little bit longer to get to where it needs to be, but its effects last 4 to 6 hours, Ralph.
I see.
And its effects, again, I honestly, as a patient, wouldn't know, because I'm not the person to ask effects of anything. Because even when doctors were giving me cocaine and heroin, all I was getting from anything was a relief in the pain in my face, if there was any, or no relief, depending. So it wasn't until I started, again, consuming the cannabis in different ways that I started being able to fend off this pain in my face and keep it at bay a little bit longer each time, doing different things, from vaporizing, as I said, to eating it in cannabis foods, different foods, to drinking it in tea, which is a huge medical.
Tell me about how to use it now. Obviously, you can't. The oil is not going to be easily to use in tea, so you're using. I presume you're actually brewing a tea from the leaves.
Yes, you are actually, from the actual bud. What you do is you get a tea bodum, which is an old-fashioned term. I'm not sure if they still use it, but it's like a tea ball. And what you do is you put enough cannabis in that tea ball to fit into the ball, and then put it into a cup and let it sit in a cup of hot water for probably 20 minutes to half an hour. Pull out the ball of cannabis. You'll have all the cannabis, terpenes, etc. in the water, cannabinoids in the water. And then you can literally add, what you want to do is to make the cannabis work in the tea. You want to add something with high fat. So you want to add a cream rather than a low-fat milk. And whatever you prefer to taste with, honey or sugar, depending. So you want to try and keep it as natural as possible. So we suggest a teaspoon of honey, and then, again, high-fat cream, etc. So
if you take the leftover cannabis that's been inside the ball and been steeping and dry it out, Does it have any effect at that point, or have you really taken out all of the active ingredients?
Well, what you can do, Ralph, is you can continue to use that same amount of cannabis for 3 or 4 cups of tea as long as it'll
Ah,
last. You'll be able to feel the difference.
feel the difference. Got it. Yeah, because I certainly I had always heard that the active ingredients in cannabis would not dissolve in water, but would only go into solution in oils.
High fat,
High
anything
fat,
high
anything high
fat, Ralph,
fats.
will help dissolve the cannabinoids and help
Yep.
the cannabinoids get to where
So
they need to be.
very good.
So
So the
you got
cream, nice.
this.
hmm That's I like that. So that's very
So,
interesting.
but also, yes, as I said, I'm not just a smoker, although I'm sure people can tell from my scratchy voice that I am.
Yep.
Ultimately, again, this having cannabis tea is a big part of my day. Having cannabis in foods, different foods. Again, what you can do and what the Stoner's Cookbook teaches you is that you can make any foods you particularly enjoy. So whatever your favorite foods are, you can learn how to cook with cannabis involving that food. So just
Fantastic.
remember that you don't have to go and get any fancy recipes or anything like that. It can be, I've had homemade cheesy potato soup. That's one of my favorites, homemade squash soup, that they've all been medicated, wedding soup, which is a big soup here in North America, with noodles and spices, etc. And
Yes.
I'm not even sure what else, meatballs and something else.
Right.
But anyway, stew, anything you can think of, you can make with cannabis, Ralph. So I want your listeners to know that, the ideas out there in the culinary world are endless for adding cannabis.
Well, of course, back in the in the 18th century and before, and I'm sure subsequently for many years, tincture of cannabis and various cannabis extracts were used widely in the confectioner's world, especially in India and in the Middle East. What we call halva was what one time made with hashish and of course sesame, and there were fantastic and wonderful uh, pastries that were made from the flowering tops of cannabis. So it's been part of the culinary tradition certainly for a very long time. Well, Alison, we have about 15 minutes left on our program.
Yeah.
Let's talk about where it goes from here, where you see your own use going and developing, and how you feel that it's going to help with your healing, and where you see our society going, both on both sides of the border, with cannabis in the future. Certainly, you were in law enforcement, so you saw it from both ends,
Yeah.
and I've had my experiences in my life that maybe are best not repeated, and we're all part of this phenomenon, which has
Yes.
been catching a great wave in the past couple of years of what's our society's relationship to cannabis, and what do you think is happening? Where do you think it's going? If we were both here 50 years from now, when we were talking about natural healing, what would we be saying about cannabis?
I think that's very exciting to think of, Ralph, that we're at this time right now where we can speak of cannabis as a healing medicine. We again have been talking about it for many years up in Canada, just as medicine out of our own right. With patients like myself, multiple sclerosis patients, AIDS patients, HIV patients, epileptic patients. But I think the way the world is turning, Ralph, is that we're all tired, not just of ourselves being ill with some of these terrible and horrendous diseases, but the children of the world suffering because of it. And I see, and honestly, cannabis oil and things like cannabis being a huge part in helping the children of the world battle what they're fighting.
There are certainly lots of parents who are autism activists and
Yes.
involved in other situations who believe that cannabis is extremely helpful. There are children with terrible seizure disorders who seem to be achieving homeostasis. Especially the high CBD cannabidiols, and seem to have a normalizing benefit with these children that have seizure disorder. Of course, here in the United States, we don't adopt the same language that you're able to use in Canada. I would never refer to medical marijuana or to medicine or to patients. To me, what what hemp is doing is it's acting as a nutrient, supporting the normal structure and function of the body. And if somebody finds that they have a healing as a result of that, well, it's not my fault. It's their body's doing. This is natural health. As I said, Dr. Rima, my co-director at the foundation, my co-trustee at the foundation, and the host of this radio program, Dr. Rima Truth Reports, calls it the Holy Grail of natural healing. And she's been bringing that message around the world in the past number of months. It's part and parcel of our efforts to promote the use of pure organic CBDs, which we are working diligently to grow. It'll be our second organic project. Our coffee project is now successful, so it's time to do this exciting project. This is one that we're so looking forward to as we develop it. We have a crowdfunding facility for our CBD project. People can go to gofundme.com/CBD hemp, and they can join in crowdfunding our growing project. And the reward, of course, you can't offer equity on crowdfunding, but the reward for people crowdfunding with us is substantial discounts on the products that we'll be coming out with. You can get back your money and maybe then some, based on that discount that we can offer people who will help us crowdfund by going to www.gofundme.com/CBD hemp. Would you like to tell us some of the links of the organizations you're working with? You mentioned LEAP. Perhaps you could give the audience some information on how to find out more. That's a good step at this stage. We want to make sure that people are empowered to continue to act and to continue to move ahead, so that in 50 years people can say, wasn't that strange a half a century ago? They had waited a whole half century to legalize helpful hemp. Helpful hemp.
Well, again, Ralph, I think that's wonderful, and I'd love to tell your listeners a bit about what I do. First of all, I'm heavily involved with LEAP, Law Enforcement Against Prohibition, being brought on as one of Canada's first globally recognized female speakers from 2004 for this organization, and they can be found at leap.cc. www.leap.cc. And just to let your listeners know, we have approximately 200 speakers around the world. The U.S., of course, having the most where they're based, but Brazil, close to where you are, my friends. We have approximately 20, which is the next largest number involved in LEAP in global activity. So we're very pleased that we have as many as 20 LEAP speakers in Brazil, close to where you are. So again, now I just want your listeners to know as well that membership in LEAP is open to anyone, but only current or former members of law enforcement members can be board members or public speakers for LEAP. Now, also, Ralph, I have my own website at AlisonMyrden.com.
Want to spell that?
Yep. Sorry.
Yes, so please, please spell that for us. I'm sorry. Didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, that's okay. You bet. It's www, and then it's my name, Alison, Alison, Myrden, Myrden.com. And that was put together by my incredible website designer partner of 27 years, Gary Lynch. So now also I speak for the International Association of Cannabinoid Medicines. Again, here in Canada, I'm listed as their Canadian representative for their public awareness for their campaign. But the IACM is a huge organization of doctors and scientists from around the world who, like Dr. Rima and yourself, Ralph, believe that there is some medical utility to this very controversial and immaculate, incredible plant we call cannabis.
All right. Very, very good. And it is indeed an incredible plant, a plant that has so many nutritional benefits to it that the world is only beginning to remember.
Yes.
A plant that has been cultivated for as long as humans have cultivated anything, a plant that provided food and rope and clothing, that provided great nutrition and great natural remedies. It's quite amazing. My own personal experiences have been varied. I've been using a CBD vape for about, I guess, 4 or 5 months. It's a low intensity vape. It's about 5% CBD content, put out by a company called Cannaway. Natural Solutions joined the Cannaway affiliation program because we wanted to be able to make CBD products available to people. And I've also been using their cream, their 5% skin cream. Both those products are really wonderful. There's no question in my mind that drawing the vaporizer, the vape into my mouth and swallowing it, it leaves me with a sense of relaxation and calm. It is, I certainly used to feel. I do a lot of typing at my computer. I used to feel some little maybe discomforts in my fingers on occasion, a discomfort in my ankle. And since I've been using the CBDs, none of that is here. I had run out at one point for a week or two, and sure enough, I was feeling some discomfort again. Now, I don't know, I would never make any claims about pain relief because that might make cannabis a drug, but I can talk to you about comfort and about supporting normal function and about how hemp does all those wonderful things. So we're very, very happy to meet up with hemp crusaders such as yourself and crusaders for natural approaches to health. These are, we appreciate the work you're doing. We have about 6 minutes left in the program, and we certainly want to give you an opportunity to, I guess, tell people, the things that are most important for them to know. And what do you want sitting on the internet on the podcast? What is the last impression to make on people who may have thought that marijuana was just, jazz musicians getting high? Maybe their last thoughts about it was when they saw Reefer Madness. I'm a little bit older than maybe some of the other people listening in. I remember in grammar school actually seeing Reefer Madness. That was back in the bad 1950s, and and my first direct experience in the presence of hemp was in 1965. So I guess before that period, you were in law enforcement and may have come across some hemp as well in your duties. But in 1994, something unique happened in your life. You found a way to control the pain that had been debilitating you. And for that, we both thank cannabis.
Yes, most definitely. Thank you, Ralph.
All
well,
right.
again, I think cannabis not only changed my life from the early 1990s or probably the late 1980s forward, because actually a friend had left a cannabis cigarette on my bedside table in the 1990s, and I had finally had enough at that point. I had had this friend over, and I'll leave your listeners with this story. And they had been sitting beside me, and they knew that I had been in excruciating pain all week. I had seen 5 pain specialists that week, and nobody could help me here in Canada. And all of them kept telling me to go home and just take pills and fall asleep and do whatever I needed to do, but their hands were tied. So this friend left this marijuana cigarette on my bedside table. And I remember I fought my friend for probably about 15 minutes and finally threw them out. I said, I can't do this. I'm a law enforcement officer. I'm a corrections officer. I'm present duty. I'm working. I cannot use this as medicine. It's an illegal substance. So it ended up that I threw this friend out after having a big fight with them. And then 15 minutes after they left, I thought, well, what do I have to lose? And I was still in excruciating pain. I smoked a half of this small marijuana cigarette. And within a half hour within 5 minutes of smoking half of this joint, I ended up having so much relief that I was actually making the bed that I had been in for the last week every day. And I was actually singing to the song on the radio and realized I had no pain whatsoever. And that was my first time in over a week that I was pain-free. So what I want your listeners to know is that usually people like me that suffer from pain in any form, and usually the more debilitating this happens, this particular response happens. But that is so much so that every time we consume cannabis, we don't get quote unquote stoned from it. We just get our pain taken away, our seizures stopped, our illness is put at bay, our bodies, as you said, realigned. We have no problems, whatever they may be. My bladder problems, my leg spasms, my nausea, my appetite, everything from being able to walk on back is dependent in my life on cannabis. So I want your listeners to know how much cannabis is being recognized around the world as incredible medicine again.
Thank you so much. You saved the best story till last. Thank you very much, Alison. This has been Alison Myrden, Canadian medical marijuana user, retired police officer, as our guest on the Dr. Rima Truth Reports for February 9, 2015. Thank you all for listening. Dr. Rima will be back next week. She will be on her way back from India, just arriving back, and she'll have some extraordinary tales to tell us of her adventures in Ayurveda. Thank you very much, Alison. We're going to bring this recording to an end, and we will be podcasting it and making it available on the Micro Effect Network. Thank you so much.
I look forward to that. Thank you, everybody. Have a great day.